and welcome to the News9 Plus show, the world's first news and current affairs show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus, as well as going live on News9 Live. Our top focus tonight on the News9 Plus show is the voice of support coming in for the Indian economy from the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. Guess what? IMF has called the Indian economy a quote-unquote star performer, saying that India has rebounded strongly from the COVID-19 pandemic and will be one of the biggest contributors to global growth going forward from the year 2024 onwards. So what does this mean? To understand that, I have two very special gentlemen joining me here in the studio. One is Mr. R. Sridharan, Editor International of the TV9 Network. Sri, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. We also have my colleague and friend Karthik Malhotra joining us as well in the studio. Karthik, great to have you with us. I'm going to begin by asking Sri, IMF always talks about how India is the outlier, India is the shining star amidst global gloom. This is taking things a step forward. We're not just an outlier amidst global gloom. We will be contributing to 16% of global growth going forward.
Absolutely, Krishna, because I think if you look at the large economies, which is US and China, they are the two biggest economies in the world. US could be facing recession next year in the new year, largely because of Fed's own policies. And we have China, which is facing the consequences of its own past sins in terms of debt, an exploding property market, a workforce which is dwindling, an aging population. So these are all problems of China's own creation. So that leaves out only India as a very large economy, which in contrast over the last 10 years has actually spent a lot of its energy fixing the underpinnings of the economy. So we got a lot of the infrastructure right, we got a lot of our banking system right, the financial services, the digitalization. All these factors have now come together to give stability in economic growth. So that's essentially what IMF is hinting at when it says that India is going to be the engine driving the global growth.
All right, engine driving the global growth. We've heard those words before, but the word we haven't heard is star performer. Those are big words, isn't it?
It's interesting, Krishna, how the narrative actually has built over the last 1 year or so. I think around this time last year, we were talking about India being a bright spot by the same IMF, by similar growth projections. So I think India over the last 2 quarters, Q1 and Q2 of this financial year, has outperformed its own expectations as well. But the narrative has actually moved from India being a bright spot to now India being a star that is shining and outperforming everybody else, right? So I just feel like most projections, most analysts and most agencies, rating agencies or otherwise out there, somehow there is always this discrepancy in the growth projections. So while IMF still considers India to be a star performer, it is still pegging India's growth at only 6.3%. The RBI, which had taken a pessimistic view of India's growth for this financial year, has revised India's projection upwards from 6.5% to 7%. We are still talking about a 6.3% from IMF. And like Sri mentioned, I think India, in comparison to other large economies, be it Japan, be it Germany, which was the first country to really go into a full-fledged hard recession this financial year, and compared to US and China, India is definitely shining brighter. And hence the badge of star is definitely a great badge to have. But we are looking at a very different world right now. When China was firing on all cylinders pre-COVID, they were growing much faster than us. So with a slowdown in China, with talks of US perhaps slipping into recession, if not a recession, hoping for a soft landing in that global economic context, India's growth coming in at whatever 6% to 7% range is good news, but unfortunately that comparison is being made only when the rest of the world is slowing down.
All right, Sri, if someone were to say, India is a star performer in a class of duds, because what's happening was the fact that most economies are likely to be duds, plagued by so many issues. But the fact of the matter is this: India did very well right through the pandemic, and more importantly, India's recovery post the pandemic has been very good. Resounding is the word used by IMF.
Yes. So that's one of the things we did, I think we got right. We did not print too much money to deal with the COVID downswing. If you look at the SOPs which the Modi government gave out, these were, of course, there was a direct monetary stimulus as well, but a large part of the stimulus was in terms of incentives and tax waivers and rollover of credit, which doesn't actually inflate the balance sheet of the government. So that has helped us in retrospect. And that also allowed industry and consumer demand to bounce back faster. But Krishna, going back to this whole concept of star performer, we don't operate in an isolated environment, right? I mean, we are dependent. Both US and China are our two largest trading partners. US just took over as the largest now. Earlier it was China, before that was UAE. But the fact is, if our largest customers are suffering, that pain will definitely get translated to some extent to India, unless you can have the local, the consumer demand within the country pick up the slack. Now that's a big ask, especially if you talk about something like IT services. That essentially comes from US and other parts of the world, largely US. So I think how much of India remains a star performer also depends on how things play out in 2024 on the global front, especially with the war going on in Ukraine and Russia, and Hamas and Israel conflict going on. So whether that is going to stoke any kind of inflationary pressures in the global market, especially around oil, we don't know. If that happens, then I think it's reasonable to expect that our growth will also take a hit.
All right. The other question I want to ask is, how do we read these messages coming in from global agencies like the IMF in a day and age like this? When we're questioning ratings agencies and the kind of ratings they're giving to a country like India, are we supposed to be jubilant every single time the IMF has some nice words to talk about the Indian economy? Because we're doing well irrespective of who's saying what.
So Krishna, I think we live in an influencer-driven world, right? And there isn't a bigger influencer perhaps than IMF, or in another context, the World Bank, or even the Asian Development Bank, as well as the rating agencies.
Right.
While they all do their own homework, and especially I'm talking in the context of investments coming into India, I think a positive sort of green signal on India's report card, co-signed by the likes of IMF, is always, it has a tendency of good investments hoping to flow into the country. So IMF is also saying, and I think IMF is also basing its projection on the fact that India does need political stability. And it is political stability which is actually going to draw in capital and draw in investments into India. So while this report card is a good headline, and while the report card is good for overall the morale of the country and the morale of investors who are seriously considering India as an investment destination, but only on the basis of ratings by ratings agencies or excellent nouns being used by the likes of IMF is not the only thing that's going to cut it for India's growth.
Shri, the only reason why I was asking this question is because there's questions being raised on the relevance of IMF and World Bank and
in economics, there is a concept of signaling. Okay. That's essentially what RBI or any Federal Reserve or any central bank does around the world when they talk about what is the direction they're going to go. So signaling is an important thing, and we should take this as a signaling, basically to the larger world, saying that India is a stable country. We have political stability. We have got the underpinnings of the economy right. There are many things that are going right for the country. And unless something extraordinary happens around the world in terms of, let's say, some global event, I think it's safe to say that we are on a good trajectory going forward, Krishna.
Hopefully not another war, isn't it? Because I think the world has had enough of wars. We've had 2 of them already. So all things remaining same, India is poised to be the star performer. At least that we can get from the IMF, Karthik?
Definitely, Krishna. But again, there are certain aspects of the IMF report card on India which are important for India to examine. Okay. If not immediate priorities, I think what is
especially
important...
on the dividend of youth.
Absolutely.
Like workers,
so dividend of the youth, I think that is critical. And in fact, that is something that even Raghuram Rajan had mentioned 2 days ago in a very different context. But I think what is important for India right now is to realize that employment has to be top priority. Jobless growth is not something India can afford. And very simply put, I think the focus has to be on job creation in the formal sector. So IMF's own report on India suggests that while we have breached the pre-pandemic levels on employment data, but that employment generation or adding up of the workforce in the informal sector is something that we need to balance out with enough employment coming in the formal sector as well. But again, from what is happening in the whole world, with discretionary spending being cut by the US and definitely cut in far wider measures by China, the US particularly, the IT sector becomes a direct sort of impacted sector in India. So the kind of growth projections that the IT sector had made on adding to the workflows have actually been reversed in the last 1 year or so. And that is something that India has to be very, very cognizant of. And add to that the startups. I think we have seen India's startups which had provided for a lot of formal employment, urban metro employment. We've seen 2023 has been a year where we have lost many of those jobs, and the numbers are as high as about 28,000 or so. So I think jobless growth is something that India cannot afford, and while these headline numbers look great, it has to be in equal measure on the back of employment.
Any other red flags that you're seeing from IMF's report? One is, of course, the kind of growth that India needs to do, which is growth with jobs. Any other concerns top of your mind, Sri?
No, so one thing which the IMF sort of indicates, and which even we have been discussing on News9 Live as well, is the fact that some of the states have gone in the wrong direction in terms of their SOPs to electorate. So that is something we need to watch out for, because if the fiscal situation at the state level becomes worrisome, then that is going to be a challenge for India, because that is going to take money away from vital investment required in infrastructure, in social spending, and it's going to go into wasteful expenditure. And that's a big concern, especially at a time when we have the opportunity to actually accelerate our growth. We'll probably risk going back in a reverse direction, Krishna.
I'm going to be the angel's advocate, which is the opposite of the devil's advocate. We're talking so much about the US and concerns about demand coming from the US being important for India's IT industry, which is a mainstay of India's growth. Talks of a rate cut by the US Federal Reserve. Wall Street is lapping up. Wall Street is behaving as if there is going to be a rate cut sooner than later in 2024, and that's this providing a lot of optimism on Wall Street. How would you view this talk of a rate cut and the possibility of an IT revival in India by the second half of 2024?
So on the US rate cut, I think it's a wishful thinking on Wall Street's part, Krishna, because I don't think there's a case for a rate cut. When do you cut rate? When you feel that the economy is softening and things are going down south. But in US, numbers are still holding. Our economy is growing. I mean, employment, although the addition to employment is slowing, the fact that you're still creating a lot more jobs than you were doing previously. So I don't think there is going to be a rate cut. But yes, Fed has signaled it's going to hold the rate. In fact, on the contrary, there are expectations that the Fed might actually increase interest rates if the economy continues to accelerate. So that's the bigger worry, why the Fed may actually engineer a monetary policy that pushes the economy into recession. Okay. So that is a worry in the US. I don't think anyone's really talking about or expecting a real rate cut to come from the Fed. I'd be very surprised. So now coming back to the Indian IT industry, I think it's a function of how the overall US economy does. And while the economic growth in the US is an important factor because that drives the demand for IT services from India, I think there are bigger disruptions at play when it comes to the IT industry, which is AI. A lot of your jobs and coding is going to get automated. So how does that impact, low-end coding in India? That's a big issue.
Right, and there's in fact talk of you can quantify the amount of money in terms of millions and trillions of dollars that AI can add to the Indian economy, isn't it? So even as we have headwinds possible that Indian economy has to deal with, there are opportunities for India to grow and grow faster than what people expected to.
So Krishna, I believe on AI, again, there are multiple numbers floating around, and just about a month ago, it was expected that by 2025, India's economy, $1 trillion worth of India's economy will be based on AI, or AI would add that much amount. These numbers kept getting revised. It is 1.85 trillion. Some estimates say it is going to be 2.5 trillion.
No one really knows.
I think nobody knows right now. AI is still a developing field, and nobody really can put a number to how much it will contribute. But I think one can very safely assume that while AI will take away perhaps some of the entry-level jobs, it is going to also generate some employment opportunities. And there are creators out there who can actually latch on to AI as a trend to create content, create code, create apps, services, delivery platforms, etc. using AI. So the frugal innovation in India could get an all-new dimension with the advent of AI.
Okay.
So the point on that to note, which I think Karthik is trying to make, is that while the economies may still grow, don't bet on jobs getting created as much.
Okay.
So we may still have a situation We're looking at jobless growth. Economy is growing, but jobs aren't getting created that much.
That's not a situation anybody wants. Definitely not us in the studio, definitely not the people watching this broadcast for sure. But I'm afraid we've completely run out of time here on this particular story. I'm going to thank Karthik Malhotra and Mr. Ashridharan for taking time out to be with us here on the News9 Plus show. Our second lead story tonight on the News9 Plus show is the brand new COVID variant JN.1. The question here at this stage is, do we need to panic? What do we need to do, bearing in mind a brand new mutation of the COVID-19 virus is doing the rounds? Bear in mind this JN.1 is a Omicron subvariant of BA.2.86's mutation. So how deadly is JN.1 and how deadly is it spread? How quick is it spread? And is it time to press the panic button? And to understand that better, I have a couple of very special guests joining us tonight on the News9 Plus show. We have Mr. Rajiv Jayadevan, co-chairman National IMA COVID Task Force and former president IMA Kochi, Kerala. We also have Dr. Chandrakant Leharia, epidemiologist and public health expert joining us tonight. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on the News9 Plus show. I'm going to begin with Mr. Rajiv Jayadevan simply because the first cases in the country have been found in Kerala. In fact, the first time JN.1 got detected was a 79-year-old woman in Kerala. Tell us from your perspective how much cause for concern is the JN.1, because the Kerala health minister had apparently said that it is not a cause for concern.
Well, it depends which angle you're looking at. Concern can come either from the point of view of the community, the point of view of the treating doctors, the relatives, or the administrators, or the country as a whole. So if you look at it from the community, from an individual standpoint, the clinical profile, which means the symptoms are not different from what was seen before with other versions of Omicron. So in other words, some people have no symptoms. Others have what's called flu-like symptoms, which is different from common cold. Flu-like symptoms, everybody knows that. Severe tiredness, which puts people in bed for a couple of days, gets them off work, requires them to take leave. But that doesn't land people in the hospital for the most part. But some individuals whose health is not so good as others tend to destabilize and reach the hospital. And such individuals may spend a few days in the hospital and also get discharged. And that's the profile we are seeing now. Deaths directly from COVID, these recent versions of COVID have become extremely rare, but that does not mean that COVID doesn't cause deaths. It can destabilize people and then push them in the wrong direction. That's true. But the kind of severe pneumonias we used to see with Delta variant in 2021, we don't see that anymore. That's a fact. So that is the community side. From the epidemiology side, I know Dr. Larry is here as well. It's his interest as well. This JN.1, from a genetics standpoint, it's very different from almost anything that has circulated commonly before. So that entitles this variant to a degree of respect which some recent variants were not perhaps entitled to. So I would watch it very carefully. There is no need to push the panic button anywhere. The questions are the following. Because it's so different, we know that it has the ability to infect people in spite of previous vaccination or natural infection or both. The question is, how big is this ability in real world conditions outside of laboratories, and how deeply will it penetrate into populations? So these are two fundamental questions for which I do not have an answer yet, and the world is looking at the answers of these two questions as we speak. But from the clinician standpoint, they're easy to treat. They don't require much medications. Most of them can be treated at home. It is not overwhelming the hospital systems yet. But I would say this, along with this, influenza and several other viruses are also circulating. Influenza has been particularly severe this season as well.
Okay, influenza has been particularly serious. Dr. Chandrakant Leharia, from your perspective, because now some are asking for the kind of COVID protocols that existed about 3 years ago to be brought back to deal with the JN.1 variant. Would you agree with that?
Well, I do not agree to that hypothesis or that suggestion. But let me put this in some more context. The thing is that SARS-CoV-2, or the virus which is called COVID-19, is a respiratory virus. And most of the respiratory viruses, once they find a community or they start circulating, they continue in the community, though at the rate of transmission may be low or high. For example, another respiratory virus is like a flu virus. Once they are in setting, they continue to be there. That's one. So respiratory viruses, once entered into a community, they stay there. Second thing is that many of the viruses, including SARS-CoV-2, flu viruses, they are prone to keep changing. The mutations keep happening. So we will keep hearing about new variants, subvariants, sublineages, and that's what is happening with SARS-CoV-2. That happens with the flu virus also. In fact, what is very assuring that the last SARS-CoV-2 variant of concern was Omicron. That emerged in November 2021, more than 2 years from today. Like we had the last variant of concern. Since then, we are seeing a subvariant, different variations or mutations in that virus, but they have not caused major concern. In fact, let's compare again with the flu and SARS-CoV-2. The flu viruses like cause annual rise in the cases, like every year we see, but at least for the last 2 years in the SARS-CoV-2, we have not seen that kind of surge or increase. But we will definitely keep seeing such kind of minor spike. So what we are seeing with JN.1 is the subvariant of a subvariant of Omicron, but it is a type of Omicron. Now, when it comes to the concern or worry, of course, any circulating pathogen, be it SARS-CoV-2, flu, or any pathogen, need to be tracked by the government. Any change in the transmission, epidemiology, genetic change should be noted by the government. So that's what is happening at the national level. When government decided to give advice that genomic sequencing should be done for all the cases which are being reported in the country, which is a standard protocol which should be done to track the epidemiology of disease. But as Dr. Jaydevan also flagged that whether this is a concern for citizen or not, I do not think this is a concern for citizen. In a public health system, any emergence or any rise in the cases of any disease in any part of the world, in this case, JN.1 case, Singapore and some other countries, should be watched carefully what Indian government is doing, what the advisory or the entire discourse is all about. But for citizen, nothing has changed. Final part is that any pathogen, be it SARS-CoV-2 or subvariant, pose higher risk for individual who have a pre-existing illness. So elderly, someone who is in long-term treatment, someone with comorbidity. Whether it's a SARS-CoV-2, JN.1 or flu or any other condition, circulating virus, all of those individuals who are at higher risk should take precaution for any circulating pathogen. And for me, JN.1 is just another pathogen which is circulating and we should be careful.
Okay, Mr. Jaydevan, the reason why I asked you about pushing the panic button is that we've already seen 5 deaths. We've had just about a 2,000 odd caseload per day, but we've already witnessed 5 deaths, and that's the reason why the questions are being asked on: are we doing enough? Are we, correcting the mistakes we made last time in terms of the spread of COVID in India?
Yeah, the deaths that have been reported, I do not have their clinical details with me. These are older individuals. I do not have what kind of existing illness. I do not have information on what kind of existing illness they might have had. The reason why I said we need not hit the panic button listening to the story about deaths is that what we saw with the Delta variant was people in perfectly good health were suddenly catching a pneumonia that nobody could treat and they were dying. And that was a panic setting, and which we have come a long way since then. It is partly because, as Dr. Larey said, the Omicron variant has substantially different biological properties, and also Omicron was coming at a stage where many people were vaccinated, and the people who were in the community had already survived COVID to a large extent. So overall, the individual risk is low in terms of what could potentially happen if you get infected. But from a community level, what we should do is to make sure the extent of spread is controlled to the best of our abilities. And that includes a little bit of care in social gatherings, keeping people shielded if they are vulnerable until the wave passes, watching carefully how high the wave will climb, how quickly it climbs. All this is data in evolution. And also to build the genomic picture in India, because if you look at the genomic profile of the last wave that occurred in India in April 2023, April and May, it was almost exclusively XBB, which is another version of Omicron. But this particular one, JN.1, is completely different. It is vastly different from all these variants So whether this difference translates into outcomes, that's the part that we have some uncertainty about.
Okay, there is uncertainty about the outcomes. Dr. Chandrakant Leharia, the only question I have to ask at this stage is that should we go back to a mask wearing protocol, and more importantly, how can they always say prevention is better than cure? Is it time for people to get their vaccine shots? How do you sort of guard yourself against the JN.1 variant?
So what we need to remember that in the last 3+ years, like nearly 3+ years, all of us have been exposed to the various variants of SARS-CoV-2 at least 2 times or 3 times, and most importantly, all of us have been exposed to the Omicron variant. There is enough scientific or epidemiological data to argue that. So we have been exposed 2 or 3 times to SARS-CoV-2, and then nearly all adults have been vaccinated with 2 shots of COVID-19 vaccine, some with 3rd shot of COVID-19 vaccine. So with that kind of exposure, we can be fairly assured that there is a sufficient immune protection in individual against a subvariant. Having said that, there could be people who have a pre-existing illnesses, who are on long-term treatment, who could be at a greater risk. But current scientific evidence does not support that we should give additional shot of COVID-19 vaccine. I do not see any immediate reason that there is a need for additional shot of COVID-19 vaccine. As far as the mask and other protocol is concerned, those are required at a time when a novel pathogen is emerging. Currently, if someone want to wear mask, or rather air pollution is a bigger threat, and for that air pollution, people need to wear masks rather than SARS-CoV-2, which is circulating, SARS-CoV-2 subvariant, which is circulating in different parts of the world. It's a SARS-CoV-2 a much smaller threat. I also want to put in the context, in every day in India, approximately an estimated 28 to 30,000 deaths happen. Those deaths happen due to illnesses, but also natural deaths. So in comparison of those 28,000 deaths, like 5 deaths, and we do not even know whether those are related to COVID-19 or they are SARS-CoV-2 positivity happen to be incidental finding them. So we should be worrying about tuberculosis. Tuberculosis caused many deaths in a single day. So there are many bigger reasons to be worried right now, but I'm not discounting. I still want to highlight that government should definitely keep a watch, but citizens need not to worry. You follow standard precaution, you follow for any respiratory illness.
All right, that's the word coming in from Dr. Chandrakant Leharia, and I'm going to thank Mr. Leharia and Mr. Rajiv Jayadevan for taking time out to be with us here on the News9 Plus show to help us understand what the new COVID-19 variant JN.1 is all about. And finally, on the News9 Plus show tonight, we are understanding what is going on in the Indian Parliament. How many Parliament man-hours are being wasted because all of that's going on in the Parliament is funded by taxpayer money. That's right, your money, my money, and the money of all those watching this broadcast. Since it's very important that we understand why the Parliament is facing so many suspensions and what will it mean for the people of India. We have Mr. Brijesh Pandey, my friend and colleague, joining me here in the studio. We also have Aditi Fadnis, a senior journalist, joining us on the broadcast. Quickly, Brijesh, let's set the context over here. 78 MPs suspended in one day. That's so many important legislations to be passed. How do you view what's been going on so far?
Well, I think this is perhaps the most action-packed winter session I have seen in my entire life. And, the temperature outside is dropping, but the political temperature is rising with every day. Yesterday, we saw 78 member of parliament suspended. Today, they have suspended approximately 50 more. And the count stands somewhere in the range of 140 plus.
Okay.
These are the numbers of member of parliament who have been suspended till now. And now, the total number of opposition MPs in both houses stands to 47, which is perhaps the lowest as it is. It's a mixed bag of thing. I completely understand that the legislator is there to make the law and to account for every single penny which is being spent. It costs a fortune to convene the house and to make sure that every member of parliament is there in the house to ensure that all the important legislations is being done and debates happen. But this is not the only thing. I mean, there comes a time when political friction gets the better of it. And the reason I said that this is the most action-packed is, what started off as perhaps one of the biggest security breach which we saw. The real trouble started post that, when the opposition members started saying that the Home Minister must come to the House and make a statement. and I think this has led to a standoff in which the government is also doesn't look like as if it cares whether they have to expel almost the entire opposition. The opposition also doesn't care to give two hoots to the fact whether they get suspended for the session or not. For all practical purposes, this is the last session as far as this 2024 election comes on. So both sides know, and that is the reason why they're playing to the gallery to extract maximum mileage.
Playing to the gallery. Aditi Fadnis, I'm going to ask you only a very simple question over here. We keep talking about parliament disruptions. It happens. It's not the first time it's happened, but the way it has happened and the levels to which it has happened in this winter session of the parliament is seriously some cause for concern.
Well, I mean, it's always a cause for concern when parliament doesn't function. But the same BJP which used to bring the roof down when the Congress was in power is now doing to the opposition what the government used to do to it when it was in the opposition. So, I mean, there's really no difference, and it's distressing to watch, because if simply by throwing out MPs and curtailing their right to ask questions, you cannot prevent people from asking questions. This is the same house where another security breach, all said and done, it was a security breach. Another security breach on the border of India and China has not been discussed till today, despite the opposition asking for discussion, passing motions, using parliamentary devices, flagging this issue. But no discussion has taken place till now. Similarly, on this security breach, the opposition's position is that what the Home Minister needs to explain. The security inside Parliament House is not his area of domain, or not within his domain. But what happened in Transport Bhavan is very much his area of security, and he has to take care of it. It's the capital of India, where law and order is in the hands of the central government. So it comes very much within the domain of the Home Ministry. So, I mean, somewhere you have to explain something, right?
The only problem is that right now 141 MPs have been suspended. That's where the count stands.
Absolutely.
That doesn't happen in every single session of the parliament. There's something fundamentally wrong over here. Is the opposition behaving like a responsible opposition, Brijesh?
Well, I think, you can't put all the blame on the opposition, whether they're behaving responsibly or not, because as Aditi was saying, if you go back before 2014, we saw, Arun Jaitley, we saw Sushma Swaraj, we saw Rajnath Singh saying that, it's the work of the opposition is to ask questions, the work of the opposition is to create ruckus, it's the work of the government to make sure that the house function. It is not the job of the opposition to make the house function. Now, all of a sudden, what happens is that when the shoe is on the other side, it's like, when you are the opposition, you parrot a completely different theory, and when you are the government, you have a completely different look at the existing scenario. I think what is happening is that the government is completely buoyed by the victory in 3 states, where many people are giving 2 states or 1 state and giving the other 2 to the Congress. They're buoyed by that victory, and I think they have also realized that even if you adopt this hardline attitude, this might curry some favor with their voter rather than be any potential political underscore. So that is the reason why they're just going ahead with dismissing people. Anybody who rushes to the well of the house stands dismissed. So that is a big problem. Aditi, I wanted to ask you a question. Do you feel that the reason why the government is going ahead and with this we'll bulldoze everything that comes in front of us attitude only because of the victory in the 3 states, or they feel that since it's the last session before the 2024 general election, so anyways nothing matters to us and our vote bank is securely tucked in our side?
The two are sort of related. I wouldn't, if the BJP had lost most of the elections which have just concluded, I'm not sure if their attitude to the security breach and the discussion on it would have been any different. It's not that they feel that they are now doubly empowered to do whatever they want in parliament, and they are actually basically telling the opposition that we will make statements outside parliament on the security breach, We will tell the nation the facts outside Parliament, but we will not discuss it in Parliament, and we will not talk about things that we feel should not be talked about in Parliament. Now, I mean, this is a very my way or the highway kind of an approach, which is not desirable. It's not good. It doesn't take you anywhere.
Okay, probably the numbers in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha for that matter is what is aiding this my way or highway approach. At the end of the day, they won the elections that they need to, and they put enough of their own people inside the parliament. And that matters, doesn't it,
Well,
Brijesh?
it does, Krishna, but it's so surprising that, in the 10 years, from 2014 till this, the government had massive, run-ins with the opposition. It happens everywhere. But never before we have seen this kind of reaction from the government where, it's not as if it's happening for the first time, The BJP is saying that, in 1989, Rajiv Gandhi did the same and suspended 60 plus MPs for 3 days, where the MPs apologized the very next day and their suspension was revoked. So it's not happening for the first time. But the fact of the matter is also that, it's a bit strange in the sense that till now government had no problem, but now after the security breach, they've been sort of somewhat cagey about it. The opposition says that the government side says that, they would want Amit Shah to come give a statement, but when he gives, they'll start heckle it. But the reason it doesn't, stand true to scrutiny is because we have seen several statements being made by Amit Shah where the opposition tried their level best to heckle it, but they have not succeeded. So
Right.
it's not like that. So it's a bit surprising that the government is adopting this my way or highway attitude and are exercising it with such impunity.
All right, and unlike those previous times when after suspension MPs tendered an apology to come in back into the House, I'm not sure if that's going to happen this time around, if anybody's going to tender an apology to get themselves back into the Parliament. But in the meanwhile, we have an important programming note that we're going to be telling you about right now, an important documentary that's dropping on News9 Plus. Former President Prab Mukarji bequeathed a priceless legacy to his daughter, renowned classical dancer and choreographer Sharmishta Mukherjee, who has been the custodian of this treasure trove. 51 volumes of Prab Mukherjee's diaries dating back to the year 1973, 3 years after his demise. She has penned a book, Pranab, My Father, A Daughter Remembers, based on those diaries. The result is an exciting window seat to over 50 years of Indian politics, a vantage point that her father enjoyed as foreign minister, finance minister, and president of India. For the readers, the book brought out by Rupa Publications provides a peek into Pranab's relationships with some of the most powerful personalities in independent India, the likes of Indira Gandhi, P.V. Narasimha Rao, Sonia Gandhi, Narendra Modi, and Rahul Gandhi, among many others. Pranab is at his candid best, revealing a number of secrets between the covers of this book, and those secrets include the trust deficit that made Sonia Gandhi deny him the post of Prime Minister, the mutual respect and trust that he enjoyed with PM Modi, his outrage at some of Rahul Gandhi's actions and his frequent disappearing acts, and the blunder that Manmohan Singh committed after the 26/11 terror attacks. Aditi Fadnis, senior journalist, continues to be with us. Aditi, I want your thoughts on a book like this, a personality like Pranab Mukherjee being at his candid best posthumously.
Well, I noted, I did a review of this book, which is appeared this morning, and I noted in that in this book you get two for the price of one. You get Sharmishta Mukherjee's story of how she grew up in a political family, and you also get Pranab Mukherjee's story told from a very different standpoint, that of a daughter who was privy to his moments when he was off guard. Pranab Mukherjee was a very, very complex personality. He was completely in the thrall of Indira Gandhi because he believed that Indira Gandhi had picked him up out of obscurity and promoted him to the finance minister of the country. He admired her intensely and had very little time or patience for successive leaders of the Congress whether they were Prime Minister or merely Congress presidents. The book has some really interesting anecdotes. It is a very entertaining book. It, for instance, describes one Pranab Mukherjee's brush with one Mr. Mandal, who was an MP for 4 terms, but they never made a speech ever, owing to his mortal fear of, for some reason, of speaking inside the house. He was a model of helpfulness to fellow MPs, and this is all noted in Pranab's diary, which Sharmishta has brought out very eloquently. But he would not give his maiden speech, and in fact, when the speaker threatened him that, Mr. Mandal, I'm going to ask you to make your maiden speech, he went and hid in the Parliament House bathroom for 5 hours and came out only when he was reassured that he would not have to make his speech. So things like this, plus of course the machinations of politics and Sharmishta's own brush with politics, short as it was.
Right.
Her view while she was in the Congress about her father's actions, especially the decision, Pranab Mukherjee's decision as President of India to go to an RSS function. She notes that at that time she was still in the Congress, and she really criticized her father's move. But now, after being out of the Congress, she feels that maybe what he did was the right thing, because the President of India has to be above politics. It's also noteworthy that neither Sonia Gandhi nor
Right.
Rahul Gandhi turned up for the Bharat Ratna ceremony which was conducted when Pranab Mukherjee got the Bharat Ratna.
Right. Aditi Fadnis, they're giving us that perspective, but you make sure you can watch the documentary and many more such amazing documentaries only on the News9 Plus app. Download it from the App Store or the Play Store. But for now, thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.
Pranab's own stand on Pakistan was far stronger. I asked him excitedly if he was going to become the PM. His response was blunt. No, she will not make me the PM. It's an emotional thing, because actually when I started reading the diaries, I always used to cry. And also, diaries are very private document. After his presidential years, I would tell him that let's start working on the diaries. But he said that no way, you can't even read them before I pass away. It was like a closure.
Former President Prab Mukarji bequeathed a priceless legacy to his daughter. Sharmishta Mukherjee has been the custodian of this treasure trove, 51 volumes of his diaries, dating back to 1973. 3 years after his death, she penned the book, Pranab, My Father, A Daughter Remembers, based on these diaries. Writing the book gave a sense of closure to the daughter, she says emotionally. For the readers, it provides a peek into the ups and downs of Pranab's relationships with some of the most powerful personalities in independent India. Indira Gandhi, P.V. Narasimha Rao, Sonia Gandhi, Narendra Modi, and Rahul Gandhi, amongst many others. Listen in.
Pranab was addressing a rally in West Bengal with Rajiv Gandhi when the news of the attack on Indira reached them. There was absolute silence. Tears started rolling down my face, and I wept inconsolably, managing to compose myself only after some time and with great effort. On reaching Kolaghat, a chopper took them to Kolkata, and from there they flew back to Delhi on a special Indian Airlines plane. What transpired in the aircraft has been the subject of much conjecture since then. It was generally believed that Pranab, by virtue of his position as number 2 in Indira's cabinet, had staked claim to be the interim Prime Minister. Since then, his relationship with the Gandhi family was seen through this prism of this speculation. Supposedly, that was the reason why the Gandhis never trusted him again. According to the media, in 2004 and again in 2009, when Sonia chose Dr. Manmohan Singh over Pranab as the PM in UPA 1 and UPA 2 governments, the quote-unquote trust deficit was brought in by what purportedly happened in the aircraft back in 1984.
News is now content. Just stream it. Download the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.